This week we are diving into the hauntings of Salem, Massachusetts, renowned for its infamous witch trials of 1692, and long considered one of America's most haunted cities. Steeped in a dark history of persecution and tragedy, Salem's eerie past has left an indelible mark on its present. From the shadowy corners of its historic buildings to the eerie past of Gallows Hill, tales of restless spirits and supernatural encounters abound. Visitors and locals alike report sightings of ghostly apparitions and unexplained phenomena, making Salem a captivating destination for those intrigued by the paranormal. This city's rich tapestry of haunted lore continues to draw curiosity and fascination, blending history with the supernatural in a uniquely chilling way. I'm Sammy.
And I'm Nicole.
And we are Spooky Sleuths.
Hey guys.
Hello.
Welcome back to Spooky Sleuths.
This week we got a spooky one. Unfortunately, we weren't able to go to the spooky one yet.
No.
Yet?
Yeah. Heavy on the yet. We will eventually make it there. I mean, technically we were close.
We were very close to Salem and we didn't even know it.
Went to the Warren Spirit Paracon last year. We wound up in like 5 different states in 2 days.
Yes. We really wanted to just drive by the Conjuring house so we could say we did in case we didn't make it there. But we took some turns. We were in like 4 different states within 20 minutes. So.
Yeah, wound up in Massachusetts.
So this week we are talking about Salem, Massachusetts. So let's start out by talking about the obvious. When someone thinks of Salem, they automatically think about the Salem witch trials.
Yes.
At least I do.
Like the witch trials, that's the biggest thing. And Hocus Pocus.
Hocus Pocus.
That's where I first heard of like the Salem witch trials and stuff, was after watching the Disney Hocus Pocus as a kid.
Now, I don't know about you, but when I think about the witch trials, I think hundreds and hundreds of people were burned at the stake. That's not completely true in terms of both the amount of people and the method of murder. So let's take a look at what the witch trials were really like.
I think of burning at the stake and that one where they would like tie them up and throw them to see if they could float, and that's how they could determine if they were a witch or not.
Yes. So we will get into all of the different tests that they put them through.
Can't wait. Let's go.
So in January of 1692, Salem Village, which today is just known as Salem, had 2 young people fall ill. These 2 young girls were 9-year-old Elizabeth Parris and 11-year-old Abigail Williams. Elizabeth was the daughter of the town's Reverend, Samuel Parris, and Abigail was his niece. The Reverend had the girls fasting, praying, and using home remedies for like a month, and nothing happened. Nothing was helping them to improve. The town doctor, who was likely named Dr. William Griggs at this time, examined the girls and determined that they aren't sick, but their illness is caused by bewitchment.
Oh my gosh. Wait, a doctor?
A doctor
is the one that decided this? Oh, okay.
So, Reverend Samuel and his enslaved household workers prepared a witch cake to counteract the magic used against the girls.
So wait, was he the original Dr. Death then?
Maybe. This is really interesting because many of the people in that time believed that this witch cake would work. To make the cake, you mix barley or rye meal and urine from the affected person. You would bake the cake with just those ingredients and then feed it to the family dog. If the dog shakes after eating the cake, the affected person is cured. It is believed that the curse would be passed to the dog and the affected person would heal quickly, or that the dog would be able to identify the witch that placed the curse and would even harm the witch.
What in the world is this nonsense? This sounds like something out of a storybook.
Right? 100% true.
Like, I would absolutely read this novel.
I looked to multiple sources because I was like, this can't be.
This can't
It
be
is.
legit. Oh my gosh.
At least it's 100% true based on what they reported. So, but I did fact check it because it sounded outlandish.
It does.
But needless to say, the cake didn't work. The girls remained sick, and now 2 more children were experiencing the illness. These 2 girls are 12-year-old Ann Putnam Jr. and 17-year-old Elizabeth Hubbard.
Did they give any symptoms or anything in your research?
They saw apparitions and invisible specters attacking them.
Okay. I was like, because if it was like something like malaria or something, like...
Yeah. And at that time, it could have been something... I don't know what diseases were popular in the 1600s, but it could have been something viral for the first 2 girls. I think the second 2 were faking it, but...
I mean, and it could
my
just
opinion.
be... It's the 1600s. It could have just been undiagnosed schizophrenia.
Yeah.
I mean, it literally could have been as simple as
And
that.
the first 2 are related, and schizophrenia is genetic, so it could have been. But it could have been anything.
It could have just been a fever from
Yeah.
a virus that... Because fevers can make you do all kinds of crazy things. And I've also seen women with UTIs do some weird things. Like, it
Yeah.
could literally be anything.
Grandmas with UTIs,
They
they
get-
will whoop you.
They get weird. They get mean.
They could lift a car.
Absolutely.
So, like I said, these 2 girls, they alleged that there were apparitions and invisible specters attacking them. Not only are Anne and Elizabeth reporting a spiritual attack, but they name 3 women who are causing it. This is where we have Sarah Good, Sarah Osborne, and a woman named Tituba Indian. Tituba is one of Reverend Samuel's enslaved workers, one of the workers who prepared the witch's cake for the other 2 girls.
Yeah. So she has to be a witch. That's why it didn't work.
Right. And I think most people have heard of Sarah Good or Sarah Osborne, one of the Sarahs. Well, arrest warrants are issued for Sarah Good, Sarah Osborne, and Tituba Indian.
Because
These
children?
2 girls said they were the witches that were attacking them.
Like, all right, that's it. That's all we need.
Yeah.
What is happening?
So they
What
were
happened?
apprehended, they were taken to the meeting house, which is like a modern day courthouse, and they were examined by magistrates John Hawthorne and Jonathan Corwin. The 2 magistrates began interrogating the women and applying an immense amount of pressure on them. Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne maintained their innocence. They're like, no, I'm not a witch. It ain't me. But Tituba, she cracks. She stated, "The devil came to me and bid me serve him." After telling the authorities about black dogs, red cats, and yellow birds, Tuba stated that a tall man with white hair asked her to sign his book, and she did. So it reminds me of like signing a deal with the devil.
Yeah.
She confessed to being a witch and implicated both of the Sarahs. Not only does she implicate the Sarahs, but she tells John Hawthorne and Jonathan Corwin that there are even more witches. She just doesn't know who they are.
Was this girl just like, if you're going to come at me, watch this?
I have no idea. When someone was accused of being a witch, the authorities would put them through several tests. Some of these tests were fatal to the accused witch. Others were embarrassing and degrading. So let's talk about some. The first is the swimming test, like you mentioned. The accused witch would be dragged to a body of water, stripped, bound, and tossed into the water to see if they would sink or float. Reasoning behind this test was that the water would reject the witches' bodies and not let them sink because they are kind of rejected from baptisms. If the accused person sank, they're not a witch. But if they floated, they were a witch. Now, they did have ropes tied around their waist so they could be pulled up when they did not float. But accidental drownings were common.
I'm sure.
The next test is the prayer test. According to medieval wisdoms, witches are not able to speak scripture aloud. So the accused would have to try to read the Lord's Prayer with no mistakes or omissions.
That reminds me of the Conjuring 3 Devil Made Me Do It. I don't know if Ed and Lorraine Warren actually did that, but when they had Arnie read out of the Bible, he was like, you're not currently possessed, because he was able to.
Yeah. Even if the person was illiterate or just simply nervous, if they did not read the scripture out loud with no mistakes, they were considered a witch. I can't even get through a whole episode without a mistake. I can't get through a paragraph without a mistake.
And have, you ever, looked at scripture, Bible verses and stuff? They're difficult.
They're hard.
Yeah, they're hard to say anyways.
But this was used as hard evidence that someone was a witch when they messed up. But if they got it perfect, it was viewed as a devil's trick. So even if they passed the test, they weren't freed from being a witch. They weren't freed of that accusation.
That doesn't make any sense. Then why have them do it?
Because when they failed it,
it was obvious that they were a witch.
The next test involved examining for witches' marks. Those accused of being a witch would be forced to strip naked in public and examined for blemishes. These blemishes were supposedly marks that they received after making a pact with the devil.
I feel like they just wanted to see these women naked.
I have a mark on my face, like a beauty mark, and I would have been a witch. This is weird. It was believed that these marks could change shape and color. That's called skin cancer, by the way. And that they were numb or insensitive to pain. This mark could
That's a skin tag.
Right. This mark could be in the form of what is called the witch's teat, which is an extra nipple. They believed this extra nipple is what the witch's helper animals would suckle on.
What in the world? I think these people were just, really kinky.
It sounds like it. Nothing was considered safe during this examination. Moles, scars, both of which I have on my face. Tattoos, sores.
Oh, well, that was evil back then.
Yeah. But, sores, anything could be seen as a witch's mark during this test.
So they're just looking for reasons to kill these women. And to get them naked.
Yeah. And men. They accuse men, too.
That's not something I was super familiar with, so that's interesting.
I think it was more women than men.
It's I think I've only ever, heard.
Yeah.
Or it might just be because anytime I think witch, I think woman. Anyways.
Warlock, I think man. Yeah.
Which probably tells you more about us than it does about them.
But given this, many members of the community would burn or cut off any marks that they had.
I can't blame them.
Just in case they were to be accused and face this test. It didn't matter, though, because the scar from their actions was also seen as a witch's mark.
They can't win.
No.
But what person above the age of 1.5 has perfect skin like that? You could accuse anybody. The pastor would have been a warlock witch.
And, what if you just, had an ingrown hair that day on your armpit?
That'd be a mark, man.
And they're like, the devil is in you.
No, man, it's just a hair.
I have PCOS. I have cystic acne. I'm sorry. If only they knew what PCOS was back then.
They barely know what it is now.
Well, the next test is the pricking and scratching test. This kind of goes along with the last test for the witch's mark. Remember how the witch's marks were supposed to be numb and feel no pain? Well, after a mark was found, it would be stabbed and pricked with a special needle repeatedly. This would continue until they found a spot that the accused did not feel pain in. This test was so common that people had jobs as prickers. Typically, these were men who used dull needle points, so the accused witch did not feel pain in the area, confirming they were a witch because you're using a dull needle. The other end of this test is scratching, which a positive test would be partial evidence of guilt for the accused. To conduct this test, the victim would scratch their accused witch with their fingernails until they drew blood. So if I was affecting you, you would scratch me until I drew blood. If your symptoms improved, I was the witch that cursed you.
That makes sense. No, it does not. It doesn't make sense in any form of the word. All of this sounds fictional.
It does.
Like, I can see why, like, it took you so long to, like, research, like, really get in there. Like, that's...
Yeah.
I wouldn't believe it.
I know. Well, the witch's cake is also considered a test, but this test wasn't the most reliable. I mean, none of these tests are. But with this test, you're relying on the dog to identify the witch. So the final test that was used is known as incantations or charging. For this test, the accused witch would be forced to speak words that ordered the devil to release the afflicted person from any fits or trances. If the person immediately got healthy, the accused witch was confirmed to be a witch. So if I affected you, I demanded the devil leave your body. And you got better, I was a witch.
I don't think that's how that works.
I don't either. So now that we know how they tested the accused witches, let's get on with the story a little bit. We're just going to do kind of a quick overview.
Yeah, if you want a more in-depth, like more in-depth details on this, let us know and we can do more episodes on it.
We'll do a whole one.
Like
a whole 3.
It is crazy how much information is out there about this, considering it was the 1600s.
And I'm trying to research some cases from the 1900s that I don't have this much information on.
Yeah.
So once Sarah Good, Sarah Osborne, and Tituba are arrested, Elizabeth Parris, Abigail Williams, and Elizabeth Hubbard temporarily recover from their illness.
Of course they do.
Ann Putnam Jr. still continues to be afflicted, and now she named 3 more people. Martha Corey, Dorothy Good, who was the 4-year-old daughter of Sarah Good, and Elizabeth Proctor. There's a lot of Elizabeths and Abigails in this story, so sorry if it's confusing.
And Sarah's.
Yeah. I think they had like 4 names back then. She also sees an elderly woman sitting in her grandmother's chair, who she identifies as an elderly woman named Rebecca Nurse. After naming Rebecca, Anne's 17-year-old servant, Mercy Lewis, also falls ill. We also see Anne Jr., her mother, and Sr. claims she's the victim of the witch's curse, along with a small group of adult women. So all these children are saying that they're affected. And then one of the servants, and now the mom, and she brings in a whole group of other adults.
We just want to get rid of the bad people. Like the people they don't like.
Yeah. And that's essentially what it was. This hysteria goes on until over 200 people are arrested for being a suspected witch. Anyone could claim to know a witch and report them for placing a curse on them. I could have beef with my neighbor, wink, wink, and go to the authorities claiming that she's a witch, and they would believe me.
And any test that they did, they would keep doing the test until they had a positive.
Right. So it just is terrifying to know that an accusation like that could have meant a death sentence. I don't like you, you're a witch. What is that? 20 people were murdered as a result of being found guilty, but none were actually burned at the stake. I feel like that's the biggest misconception.
Yeah, when you said 200 people, I'm like, 200 people were burned at the stake. Like, that was the automatic thought I had.
Yeah, nope, only 20 of those 200 died. And the ones that were killed, because there's one that dies in custody awaiting trial, but some of them died in jail. The ones who were tried and found guilty were all hanged in Gallows Hill. So none were burned. I feel like that is the biggest misconception of all time.
The media lies. That's crazy.
Now, there were witch trials somewhere in the UK, England. I get confused between those two. I think one's in Europe somewhere.
It's like England's part of the UK, but you don't have to be England to be in the UK.
Okay. Well, somewhere in Europe, they had mistrials.
Probably.
Witch trials that resulted in a lot more deaths and people were burned. So I think there's some confusion there that's come over time, and we'll have to do an episode on those trials too.
Yeah. I'm intrigued now.
The Salem witch trials went on until January of 1697. So the trials lasted for about 5 years. A little less than that, because it was after maybe March-ish whenever they started accusing people.
So 200 people, and 20 of them died, all in a matter of 5 years.
Mm-hmm. And that's just because they couldn't try all of them so fast.
Well, yeah, they had to put them through 1,500 tests till they got it guilty.
Well, in January of 1967, not 1967.
I was like, whoa, time jump.
In January of 1697, the authorities apologized for the errors they made by executing the accused.
Yeah.
That was the end of the witch trials.
So, our bad, we're done.
Yeah. Those who made the accusations of witchcraft, they faced no consequences. They went on to lead normal lives. Some did publicly apologize for their roles in the horrific events that took place during their trials. Given the horrific nature of the murders of people who were murdered based on nothing but the word of someone in the village, it's no wonder that Salem is a paranormal hotspot. One place in particular is called the Witch's Dungeon, the Witch Dungeon. This is the location where accused witches would be imprisoned before their hangings.
Oh.
So it's still there. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah. Can we go?
Yeah.
Like, is that a place you can visit, like for tourism?
And it's like a museum.
That's neat.
Yeah, it's a dungeon turned museum. And people who visit often report eerie feelings and a residual energy that projects fear and suffering.
I'm sure.
I can't imagine. It's probably so heavy in that place.
It probably gives like Bel Air house vibes.
Yeah. The next haunted location is the Witch House. This was the home of Jonathan Corwin, one of the magistrates. And he was actually the judge who condemned or freed every accused person.
Of course he was.
This house has several 17th century artifacts that help keep it resembling how it was back in the day. One super cool artifact is actual documents from the witch trials.
That's neat. Mm-hmm. I'd like to see that.
There's also a black shoe in the wall of the home, which is based on the superstition that it would ward off witches and warlocks. I guess that's a very New England thing. There's a witchcraft doll in the home as well, which is called a puppet. Witches would place hexes on the dolls and use them to curse their victims.
So kind of like a voodoo doll situation.
Yeah. This doll, though, is not original to the home, but to the home of an accused witch named Bridget Bishop, who lived nearby. Bridget was actually the first woman to be hanged for being a witch. The witch house has a lot of paranormal activity that investigators capture. Investigators report unexplained touches and cold spots in different areas of the home. A little girl's voice has also been captured. It's believed that this is the voice of the daughter of Sarah Good, Dorothy.
The 4-year-old?
Yeah. She was only 4 years old when she was accused of being a witch. Dorothy confessed to being a witch.
At 4 years old?
Yes. And she told the authorities that she saw her mother working with the devil. She also claimed that she had a snake that Sarah had given to her, which talked to her and sucked blood from her finger, convincing the authorities that the snake was her familiar.
She's 4!
And that makes me wonder what they're telling her. Like, when she was being held, did her mother say, put all the blame on me? Just accept it and put it on me. You know, like, because she's 4. How could she make that up?
Yeah, that's
Someone
And
had
it's
to
not
say
like
something to convince
she can
her.
watch TV or anything. It's the 1600s. Like, that's somebody has to be feeding
Yeah.
her that information.
Yeah. And honestly, like, if I was in there with my 4-year-old, I would be like, whatever they say, just put it back on me. And that's save my daughter. Yeah. Dorothy was released from prison, and she did not face a trial, but she did see her mother give birth while her mother was awaiting trial, and the baby unfortunately died.
Is that because of lack of care because of the
I'm
situation?
assuming. Or because it was the 1600s.
Or because she was a witch? You don't know.
She also saw her mother being hanged.
Oh.
So the theory is that if this little girl voice that is heard in this house is Dorothy, that she's resorting back to a traumatic time in her life as a child in prison for being a witch.
Like a residual situation, not a...
Yeah. The last place I want to talk about is Gallows Hill. This is confusing.
Okay.
The location of it is confusing because there's conflicting things online. People who say they live there say, no, it's not here. It's up here, but I'm going to talk about this other place. And it's just very confusing. And I honestly don't know if anybody knows where it actually was. But this is where I mentioned that all the convicted witches were hanged. Writer Nathaniel Hawthorne, you know, that famous writer, he described...
Did he do the Scarlet Letter?
I don't know. Yeah.
I didn't actually read it. But.
And House of the Seven Gables. I've heard of that one. Well, he described this place as the field where superstition won her darkest triumph, the high place where our fathers set up their shame. To the mournful gaze of generations far remote, the dust of martyrs was beneath our feet. That's a really, pretty way to say that.
Just say, we killed a bunch of women here for no reason.
After they would hang the witches, the sheriff would discard their bodies into a ditch. That night, the families of the witches would come to gather the bodies of their loved ones, take them home, and give them a proper burial. Rebecca Nurse, that was accused and convicted, is one situation where this happened. Her parents came, or her family came, and got her. Which she was elderly, so, I guess maybe it was her kids that came and got her. Probably not her parents.
Yeah.
Also, elderly could have been 30s.
Absolutely.
Which means you're elderly and I'm not. Anyway, so...
You're so rude. Gosh.
Today, the area is thought to have been Gallows Hill, one of the areas that they think it was, is actually a baseball diamond. But there's a park close by that bone fragments have been found in. It can't be confirmed if these bones are from any of the convicted witches, but it's interesting to think about. Proctor's Ledge in Salem is also thought to possibly be the site of the original Gallows Hill. The condemned were taken to the gallows by cart, and the current Gallows Hill is not any place that a cart can get up because of how steep it is. There's actually a hill named Gallows Hill in Salem. But because
that's not where it could have been.
Yeah, they couldn't have got the people up there on a cart. So people think the actual hangings may have actually taken place at Proctor's Ledge, which is right next to the hill. Outside of the witch trials, Gallows Hill has a history of people unaliving themselves. Some do not believe this was the true site of the hangings from the witch trials, but I can't prove it. I wasn't there. It was 350 years before I was born. Regardless of what actually happened here, people do experience paranormal activity in both places.
I feel like that whole town is probably riddled.
Investigators and visitors who are not seeking the paranormal both report full-bodied apparitions in the woods. We already don't look in the woods when it's dark.
No. Don't look through the trees, man.
Maybe a Wendigo will come get you. They also hear disembodied voices in the middle of the night. And there are even reports that a demon lurks on these grounds. Back in 1992,
I was one.
I was 3 years negative. Various churches gathered at Gallows Hill and weren't warned that there was a demonic energy at this location.
I mean, there's probably an energy up there, but
Some investigators claim to have interaction with this demon.
I think people claim to have a lot of interactions with demons because they get caught up in the investigation.
Yeah. You want to see a real demon? Take a trip up the road. You'll see this eventually. You'll see what we're talking about eventually. So what do you think about Salem, Massachusetts? What happened during the witch trials is terrifying. But living in today's world, I can honestly see how it happened.
Oh, absolutely.
It seems like a dystopia where someone can accuse you of something, and if you don't pass an arbitrary test, you are sentenced to death. I could see that being a thing today.
Yeah.
And I think it happens a lot.
It's like, look at how many people get accused of things that you can go to prison for.
Right.
That aren't true.
I mean, we watch documentaries on that occasionally. Or even people who are on, like, death row. And then 30 years later, we find out they didn't do it. You know, it happens. So I can see it. And they didn't have, like, as formal of a system or any technology to help figure anything out. I don't think you could technology figure out a witch, but whatever.
Especially now that that's very much accepted as like a religion.
Yeah.
I don't think that could necessarily fly today, but I could see it being amped up to...
Yeah, and just to be clear, we're not talking about Wicca
in
this episode. We're talking about the Salem, quote-unquote, witches.
Yeah.
So let us know what you think. What locations in Salem would you like us to investigate when we make it out there eventually?
Hopefully. We have a pretty big bucket list, though, so...
If you made it this far, please leave a witch emoji in the comments section if you're watching on YouTube. Make sure to rate and review us wherever you're listening to us. If that happens to be on YouTube, please don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment.
Give us a share. Get us out there. Like, help us get this out to more people because I didn't know a lot of this. Like, I had no idea that nobody was burned at the stake.
Right? It's crazy. Don't forget to check us out on TikTok and Instagram at Spooky Sleuths Pod.
And on that note, stay spooky, friends.